Okay. Welcome to the afternoon session of this Intersect meeting. Very, very happy to see so many people here showing up in 20. And it's my pleasure and honor to introduce two super ladies for the first session of the afternoon. We have first Jaya, Baloo, and then Elisa, Costante. I don't think that Jaya needs any introduction. She has been the CISO of KPN, now the CISO of Avast. Before that, she was working in Costa Rica, Egypt. For some reason, she came to the Netherlands. I cannot fathom them. She's a dive master. She likes to fly, but now she has a little bit not enough time for doing that. Well, with 3 kids, it's also difficult to do everything, and I understand her. And I lost her. Where is she? Jaya, here, yes. I'll stop immediately, give you the word, and I'm looking forward to your talk.
I was about to respond that I'm looking forward to my talk too. There's nothing like a title like this where you overpromise and underdeliver. Just doing it the corporate way. So let's just get started here. While I click away a Microsoft accept everything, I literally am accepting everything. Account aanmaken, nee. Okay. Okay, so you guys might have heard this one before. Have any of you heard about the market for lemons? Yeah? Okay, so there was a 1970s paper, and actually the first time I ever heard anyone talk about it was Bruce Schneier, who talked about the fact that in cybersecurity in general, we've created a market for lemons. So you had your hand up. So what's the market for lemons?
It's basically a market that is promising to sell something, but actually not delivers.
Well, okay, that's kind of like my presentation, but that's going to be a running joke, but that's not it. So the market, it is a little bit, it's based because of the fact that there's an information asymmetry between the buyer and the seller. And the market for lemons was specifically at the time of its inception in the 1970s talking about the used car market. Have you guys ever bought a used car? Yep. Proud used car owner. Love it. So here's the deal, right? When you buy a used car, how well do you know how the car runs? Are you a mechanic? How do you know if the engine's going to break in like 2 cycles? Trust your garage. Okay, so then you have an expert vetting your potential lemon for you. So the clue is that, he said, okay, I don't know this information myself. I'm going to reach out to someone else to figure out am I buying a lemon or not. When people choose products, however, security products specifically, or just regular consumer products, they don't necessarily always have an expert they can easily go to try to vet that product. And in the used car market, that actually creates an incentivization. It creates an incentivization from the seller to sell shitty products. Because, hell, the buyer's going to buy them anyway, because the buyer is basing their decisions most often on cost or some perception of brand quality, or something else, but not the technical efficacy or the underlying quality concerns that you would kind of need to know if you were going to buy a car, or an IoT product. And look, this market, this lemony IoT market, there's nothing wrong with these numbers. Any investor will tell you that this kind of growth is some place that they would naturally want to invest in. So here's a room full of people who are focusing on one very specific area of quality in this potentially lemony market. How's it going? No, I'm not kidding. How's it going? How are you going? Guys, audience participation was required. It said that on the invite. So the clue is that it's not going that great, but there's something that we specifically need to be able to do about it. Otherwise, we're going to keep continuing with building new technologies with old shitty problems that we already knew about in it. So we already fucked up the incentivization with the market for lemons because we fucked up the buyer's motivation by not giving them enough information to make them have an educated choice, and we fucked up the seller's motivation by not letting them have, this sort of punishment when they do something something bad in the area of security or another quality concern. And when you take a look at how it's going, this is the OWASP Top 10 from 2018. Do you guys still remember it? 2018? That was like pre-COVID, you know, BC. So in 2018, there was a bunch of things that came on the IoT OWASP Top 10. So weak and guessable hard-coded passwords. Just tell me yes or no. Still there? Yep. Okay. Insecure network services. Still there? Yeah. Okay. There might be something that's not there. So let's be fair. Lack of a secure update mechanism. Everybody using some sort of certificate and good encryption? Good updating? Guys? No. Okay. Use of insecure, outdated components. Yeah. All right. Insufficient privacy protection. Yeah. Okay. We can keep going. Insecure data transfer and storage. Right. Okay. Lack of device management. All right. Default settings. Yep. And physical hardening is nothing new. We all know that sucks. So my point is, if none of this has actually changed, I wonder, like, why we would think that the weather wouldn't be taken with us. If we haven't been able to change any of this in 4 years, despite all of the rapid innovation and prototyping and that we're doing, then why do we think that we wouldn't take the weather with us? We take it everywhere we go. We take all of our old shit when we build our new shit. And we don't see that any clearer when we look at all of the underlying subcomponent architecture that we're talking about. So log4j, I thought it was actually really good. You guys saw that from Bosch? Any Bosch people here? Bosch? Okay, so Bosch claims to have millions of devices, 10 million devices on their IoT suite, which I thought was pretty impressive. But what they did that was really good, as soon as log4j hit, they raised their hand and says, yes, we have this problem. We're working on it. Avoiding vulnerability is never going to be really possible, but taking culpability and taking responsibility and then providing a sort of path for your customers, that's the right way. So I think Bosch people, well done. And then like a couple of weeks ago, you guys also saw, which I think, look, log4j, even though it was ubiquitous, it was still relatively obscure in terms of being able to find it. The unpatched DNS vulnerabilities, less so. And I find that more worrying in a way than the fact that we have these log4j stuff. And why is it still a problem? Well, it's still a problem because in the work that I do at Avast, where we try to find bad guys, worse guys, and like the really, really the horriblest of the APT folk, then we still see all of these devices still being used, and we kind of ignore it. There's also a certain degree of incident fatigue, and just to sort of ignore it when it comes to yet another unpatched, insecure IoT device that's part of a botnet, some random cybercriminal ring, or participating in DDoS. Frankly, it's hard to care. So I have one more area of you where the incentivization is fucked up to do anything about it. Because we see them too often. There are too many. You are just exhausted with dealing with yet another one that is participating here. So we see it, and we cannot always, like, you know, whack-a-mole them fast enough. So the supply chain thing is a thing, and it's not a new thing. And I really genuinely am concerned, not just about the fact that we are constituting supply chain threats, and we will have them for a long time, just like we have them already, but the fact that we won't be able to understand their interdependence to each other until it's too late. Very often, there's not a single supply chain interdependency, but it's multi-layered. So when we see something going wrong, we see it like going wrong in more than one area. So it's not just a single domain. And this is actually one of the hardest problems there is to solve. And you guys may have seen this when you're trying to analyze any advanced attack. Trying to find the initial vector of the attack is super difficult. So we're seeing things like, we'll see an entire chain of an attack, and then we'll see a couple of weird domains visited, or we'll see a typo squatting domain. And it's really hard to rule out complete incompetence versus malicious behavior. When you see some of this stuff, we cannot tell the difference. Can I just ask, does anyone have experience in this type of incident response and trying to rule out these kinds of things? Incompetence versus malicious behavior? Yes. Yeah? It was just Grinder or, yeah. But wait, hold on. Maybe I should try to understand this. Your camera was visiting a Russian website, but just for fun. Okay, good, good. Good, good, good. Okay, exactly, or. And this is... Yeah. Okay. Let's talk during the break. So my point is that it's just messy. It gets messy. It becomes really difficult to do the things that we would need to do in order to actually kind of, understand all of the potential areas of attack, because we see them happening all the time and they never happen in single instances. That was the point I was trying to make. And these types of different supply chain attack possibilities are interdependent. So unless we can peel the onion, we won't know exactly what's happening. And there's something that I feel like also needs to be said, which I assume that we're kind of taking for granted now, but the idea of turning dumb devices into smart ones and then collecting all of the telemetry on top of it, that is not going to go away. And I think we really need to understand, it's kind of like the advertisement for the McDonald's documentary, when you find out they're not just selling burgers, they were selling pieces of land. Anybody know what I'm talking about? Right? This gigantic evil plan that is McDonald's. Who knew? So the same thing, I feel, is there when we look at these types of devices. They actually don't bloody want to sell you a device. That's not where they make their money at all. They're selling you the device so that they can get the telemetry, so that they can actually get the data that's behind it. And I find it actually quite disturbing that we're kind of like sheeple, just go ahead and buying the latest devices, which then you must provide your data in order to use the device, and that these dumb devices are simply being taken off of the market. I find that really terrifying. And again, guys, I'm not sure about you, but why does your your washer dryer need to know, what your favorite cycles are? So the only reason I can think of is that they're doing this to improve product marketing behavior, but they could also be upselling this to the washing companies to provide more specific solutions. So I feel like that data insight model is the bigger model, rather than simply selling you a device, which explain the lack of incentivization to give you quality in terms of security mechanisms and their relevant updates. This is not a joke. The toilet installation is connected to Microsoft Azure IoT Central. The first time I saw this, that the toilet was connected to Azure, I didn't believe it, okay? Because I thought, what idiot would connect a toilet to Azure? Why? Any ideas? Come on, smart people. Why do you connect the toilet to Azure? Wait, how did... Improving the shit? I don't get it. Okay, so... So the reason, this is actually, and you can Google this, so I didn't believe it the first time I saw it. Turns out that Microsoft provided an entire IoT ecosystem for different types of companies to make their products on and then leverage the Azure backend. And one of the first people that introduced this was in 2019 at the Consumer Electronics Show was Kohler. Do you guys know Kohler? I pronounced it correctly. So Kohler has a smart toilet where you can program your preferred seating choices and ambient lighting. And the best part about it is Kohler includes, free of charge, Alexa, who's always listening in the background. I wish I could make this stuff up, but the truth is stranger than fiction. So this is a real thing. Is Security Matters investigating the toilet? I just want to know. The Kohler toilets are at Rabo? Yes, so Rabobank don't go to the toilets. That's clear, right? So, okay. No, but I think it's really terrifying that you have these devices that are not only like slowly doing what they said they are doing, but also creeping, encroaching on other areas that you don't expect them to be in. And again, I find that the core functionality is in it. Look, honestly, if there is some health medical benefit, if they're installed in, I don't know, hospitals to do a diagnosis of your excrement for medical purposes, I might understand. This, however, and this is a facility in a company where it's very clear, only data that is logged at the time of activation and the duration of your visit. All data is gathered anonymously. Who would want to go to the bathroom there? So, okay, I think I've made my point. So I find it really smart, is what I want to say, that it's like the McDonald's model. They're not really interested in selling you the burger. They're there for the plots of land. So, and if we say that about data, if we say that, right, that data is the real product here, not the IoT device, but the data behind it, then I think that like this notion that corporations have held for pretty much a decade, which is the data is the new oil, we should flip that around in this community and say if data is the new oil, then data breaches are the new oil spill. And why is that? Because they have an incredibly long environmental tail. They're very difficult to clean up. And they have like a high degree of like influencing and affecting other ecosystems that you would assume would be like intact despite this data breach. And that's what we are seeing across the internet, that that's not true. Those three qualifications are the ones that make these data breaches so difficult to clean up. They're just pervasive. People are dumping them. They're being used for all kinds of purposes. You know, they're being held onto for a very long time. And then, unfortunately, they're helping the attacker improve their techniques rather than helping the defender get better at preventing breaches. And I'm not talking about the Ashley Madisons or the adult cameras or the ones that are visiting the Russian websites. I'm talking about the fact that we really have this wealth of data that we knowingly, and now with these devices, almost unknowingly, propagate throughout the internet, but have no idea how they will come back to haunt us in the future. And I find that if we want to talk about regulating anything, it should be about that. So, there is something I should say. I know that there are vendors who are trying to do a good job. Like I thought it was really good that Bosch, when they had found Log4j on their 10 million devices, raised their hand and said, yes, we have it and we're fixing it. That's good. But I think there's also folks that with the best intentions actually like forgot what they were doing and took a kind of dumb device and then wanted to add like intelligent features to it, but did it in a really stupid way. So for example, these devices, like a light switch that you could just turn on and off, now you cannot turn on and off unless you've done the software update first. You can stand next to it. You can turn it on and off physically. But you can't unless you have the software update installed. And it's the same for the dishwasher. It's the same for the window blinds. The window blinds. You cannot open them unless you have a patch or an update installed. Look, I'm the first one that will tell you immediately install the patch and the update. But there should be some sort of fail-safe mode that returns to the dumb setting when that update, for whatever reason, isn't available and cuts off any other connectivity so that the attacker also can't use it. Why don't we have that as a requirement in the OWASP Top 10? Right? That you should be able to flush the toilet even when it has no internet connectivity. Your friends will thank you. So I also worry about the fact that at some point in time, the novelty of taking all of these devices, and whether that's in your office or your home or some other industrial application, when the novelty of some of these things wear off. And like we talked about, the things and the lights, etc., this is the same thing. Operate this elevator from your smartphone. Yeah? And this, for me, is a real worry. I mean, look, you're in the fucking elevator. You could just press the button. Why would you need to download the app, then click on where you need to go? Where is the logic here? The problem is that the novelty of this will wear off. And then we will have an elevator, which can cause real human harm, still capable of being reached through some buggy ecosystem of an app connected to the internet, to get back on the elevator. And you can activate it potentially when you're not in the elevator. So why, again, would we want this feature? Please, someone explain this to me. Yes, you're going to explain. Yeah.
Someone wants to enter a building, go to a certain room, then via that you might get an authorization.
But why would you need to activate the app from the lift? I understand that. That's just building automation. And that assumes that you have some other authorization that's required so that you can operate parts of the building without the other. But wouldn't it be easier to have some sort of physical token at that moment and not, at that moment that you're in the lift, download the app, start the thing, and then operate the elevator independently? So I agree with you, Edward. I know where you're going with this, but I want to point out that this particular example is one that's going to be long-lived. We're not going to change the elevator functionality that quickly, and it presents a real threat to human life. The same thing with, I don't know if you have this, I'm not even sure if it's available in the Netherlands yet, but in the United States you have a lot of these delivery robots, quite a few of them. The delivery robots are usually equipped with, some form of mobile connectivity. They're there delivering food packages and other things in the university. Sometimes, though, they do get lost. They do get jammed. And they wander outside an area where there is no more connectivity. So they wander literally into the forest. They lose their GSM connectivity, and they're just there. Yeah, I know, we feel bad for the robot. This is good. When the robot revolution happens, you're going to be okay. But my point is, I find that we feel bad for this robot, but what about the hundreds and thousands of other devices that aren't as cute and fluffy? Right? When there is no cute and fluffy factor, the fact that we've left this out there after building it once and fire and forgot is a real problem. So I really think that this is something that, again, I'm not a big fan of regulation, but I think these are areas where regulation would certainly help. One more example. Have you guys heard of this company, Insteon? Anyone? Yep. Who said yep? Yep. You work there. Huh? Their servers are down. Let me tell you why their servers are down. No money. Oh, it's always a good reason why their servers are down. But no, it's not just no money. They decided to suspend operation. When Apple announced HomeKit, they were one of the first 2 suppliers on the market that automatically integrated with Apple HomeKit. So you would have expected, yes, they're going to do great, skyrocketing investor, blah, blah, blah. They did indeed run out of money. And then what they did was they proceeded to remove all of their websites, information about them online, and their LinkedIn notes. So the CEO of the company took away the fact that he worked there off of his LinkedIn page. They scrubbed their entire bloody profile. So not the servers left. Everything about the company was like literally stripped. Unfortunately, not their products. Their products stayed out there with their customers. Yeah? And then a lot of the customers had to figure out how to reverse engineer it, how to make them still work with other things, because they had them for home automation. So they had them for their ceiling lights, their lamp, their space heater, the string lights, and all of these adopters who were like, yes, Apple HomeKit, woo! They were totally screwed when Infineon ceased operations. And this is, for me, again, a worry. We leave this shit out there. There's a sunk cost dilemma with all of these people that have made the investment in these type of technologies, but then don't know what to do when the company ceases operation. And again, a really good area of regulation where you say there's a minimum amount of device support that must be there, even when a company decides to fuck off. Because this isn't fair. This is not okay, and we should hold them accountable. So I know I'm getting really mad. I clearly did not purchase Infineon, but not that far away. And I think that, I'm, again, not such a big fan of having 10,000 regulations, lots of standards, but I do think that there are moves in the right direction. So I think that we do need to look about which type of things can we agree to for interoperability, and who has the highest degree of winning, and that we do need to figure out how to make a sort of long-term bet. Because if these companies do decide to go away, however, there is some potential to allow them to interoperate with another home center or a different software packet, then that should be fine, right? Then they can leave and they can just relegate their tasks to a custodian. So I'm still waiting for that. I have hope. I don't know if there are religious differences here in this room between Zigbee and Z-Wave, and are there? Is there a Zigbee camp and a Z-Wave camp, or? No? Not really? Not so much? Okay, well, my point is that Zigbee has this Matter thing, which a lot of device manufacturers have said that they're going to support. So I do find it interesting, and let's see if they actually wind up beating it out. And remember when I said there are bad guys using this, but there's worse guys, and then there's a really, really horrible worst-case scenario? Unfortunately, if it was just up to the realm of you know, the Team von Herbert-Bos hacking stuff, and a few people online hacking stuff, I might be okay with all of the hacking that's happening. And if we were also only had a couple of cyber criminals with the, you know, every once in a while a DDoS, a botnet, I might be able to handle that too. What I find really concerning is that when it spills over, all of this activity to ICS SCADA, and we actually see state actors have a continuous, ongoing effort to compromise these devices using the same types of tools, tactics, and procedures. And you might have seen that recently we saw exactly this happening again. And you don't need to read through any lines here. This is Russian activity. There's no line reading required. There's no, ooh, what's the clue? There's no clue. It's just Russian activity. This is in line with previous Russian behavior. They have exploited different moments, different types of ICS SCADA attacks, and then as early as a month ago. So we, at Avast, we try to see if we can see any of this behavior. It's difficult for us to see any of it because of the fact that we're a consumer antivirus. So we don't exist on IC SCADA domains, we don't see a lot of this traffic, but we try to take all of the IOCs anyway and try to look for any outcoming or ingoing traffic. And we have a whole bunch of network honeypots, including on IoT and including on ICS SCADA. So we try to see if we see anything on the honeypot activity. And what you have is you have really good understanding of basically the entire networks that are being operated by large energy companies. And even though they tend to focus very often on very specific types of devices and from very specific manufacturers, the TTPs are universal. And when you look at the actual workings of those TTPs by Chernovite, then you'll see that actually, even though the target would have been Siemens, it could have just as well been used on another PLC. So I think that it behooves us here, again, to go back to, well, hell, if that's the case, and the advice here is so damn generic, this should be like InfoSec Basics 101, why haven't we changed this? Why don't we have this written up in a standard where it doesn't matter whether it's Siemens and it doesn't matter if it's, what's their name? Anyway, I'm forgetting the other device manufacturer. But the point is, it shouldn't matter. It should matter that they're all complying with the same type of behavior. Has anyone actually looked at Pipe Dream? Yeah? Do tell.
What do you want to know?
Well, what did you look at?
I look at the capabilities that they developed. And basically they are exploiting functionalities in the communication standards. There is no buffer overflow or vulnerability that they are actually using. They are leveraging the way that systems were designed to be.
Yeah, yeah. Which we see more often. You know, it's a lot of like using the regular functionality, of course. But I'm saying that here, then, we should be able to design things better, and not just for the systems that were specifically targeted, but for a wider array, because it would mean equivalent amounts of vulnerability in any other vendor.
Yeah. At the same time, these devices will exist for the next 20 years.
Yes. Yes. And this is exactly why I feel like we should be doing something about this now, rather than waiting for them to be exploited and then figure out how to do it, especially when the actual response to such an attack is quite elementary. Okay, so I feel like we're hitting something here, because if we know all of this, if we know what to do, right? And we can understand how it works within the systems that are being targeted. I feel like what we still don't understand somehow is what the root causes are of why it goes so wrong. We're all addressing like a sort of symptomatic problem. So how come we don't understand, you know, there is a pressure with all of these companies of time to market. We know they need to put their stuff out and they need to get it done fast. We know that even though we know how to test and vet and verify, that for some reason that doesn't happen, or it doesn't happen well enough. Or they can't afford it, or they don't have the expertise, or they don't know how to find it. So how do we actually figure out how to simplify and democratize that? How do we better support, like, all of that supply chain threat by having a software hardware bill of materials without infringing on any types of intellectual property and understanding those dependencies that we just talked about. And then how do we, if we can do this, large companies know how to get this done, but how do we get smaller companies in a place where they can train their, you're shaking your head, are you saying that's never going to happen? Yeah? All right. No, I'm with you. That's why I'm saying we still need to understand. I get it. I also have the fuck, we're screwed. But that's not why we're here. We're trying to figure out how to actually solve the actual problem. How do we support the smaller companies with training and development teams, getting accessible training and testing, and then making sure that we don't just have findings, because that's what I do for a day job. I come up and be like, yo, red team found this. And then the team that we're giving it to just stares at us. Because clearly, had they known, how to fix it, they wouldn't have done it in the first place. No one comes to work wanting to be evil. Well, some people do, but that's just HR. So, but look, so I really think we need to do a better job trying to make sure we understand that team better, to figure out how we can help them remediate when we do find stuff. And then finally, the people who find stuff are also exhausted. Incident response, product security, they're hammered. So we need to know how to really think about getting them to a place where they think like, it's all broken, I'm going to just screw it over and, whatever. We need to get them to a place where they're actually thinking about, what are the amounts of customers they have to support, what's the amount of revenue they need to generate, and then actually give them the space to do the job. Because even with the largest vendors on earth, there's no PCERT team. There's no real product security happening. There's, like, when responsible disclosure and bug bounties happen, or bug bounties is a luxury, when this happens, we don't often know still, to this day, what the hook-in point is. So I think we need to take an example of things that are onerous, like PCI DSS. They do a lot of things badly, but the one thing they do very, very well is have a minimum set of requirements depending on your company size and the volume of your transactions. Why wouldn't we do the same thing for devices and vendors in this area? We take a look at how much money you make and who you support to, and we try to figure out what types of compliancy, testing, validation, training requirements you would need to have. Yeah, with PCI, if you have a very minimal amount of transactions, you only have to do some sort of self-assessment. The more you have, the fuller the type of compliance requirement you have. So what if we could get to a place, and we don't have it yet, we've got bits and pieces of this ecosystem. What if we could find a way to have some sort of default scanning, filtering, checking on the back end of all of these devices? At Avast, we used to have this product, a hockey puck called Omni. Here's the deal, though. A lot of people don't feel like paying for security. They think that they should just come with every other product they got. But who is incentivizing them? This goes back to the market of lemon story. Who's incentivizing these companies who are building you the toilet to put in security and privacy measures? No one. No one. So that's why we have to figure out how to get it done at the network layer. Then we got to figure out, because we're not going to have endpoint analysis, and then we have to figure out how we get to a quicker place for these companies to test. What I thought was really cool, did you guys see this? So on Defender, and this is a competitor, by the way, of Avast, so just to be clear, I'm stepping out of my box for a minute, and what they did is they used Binwalk Enterprise. They popped it in here to be able to look at the binary from a Defender perspective. Is anyone playing with that yet? Playing with it? Just play? No? Okay, maybe we should. Just check it out. Maybe it's a really good potential solution. I don't know. And then, I think we need to also figure out how we do like a more thorough amount of network scanning asset discovery, because we're going to leave those sad little robots and little machines that are totally insecure out there, rotting away for God knows how long. And then let's make sure we have strong open source skills and we don't try to compete between them. So I don't care what your flavor is, Shodan, Census, Zoomide, let's make sure we see everything that requires seeing. I want to thank you for your patience and for my story that went a little bit all over the place. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. We have a schedule to follow, so we don't have much time for questions, but you don't want to take questions. But but Jaya is also going to stay here. She's going to be here tomorrow, also in 20 for the Tucker Symposium and then the honorary doctorate. So perhaps one question, because I think the audience is probably going to shoot a number of them. So let's have one good question. No one is daring. No one wants to dare. Okay, then we'll take the question offline. And then it's my pleasure to introduce Elisa Costante, I'm the proud ex-PhD supervisor of Elisa. And after her PhD, she came to work for Security Matters. She became the CTO of Security Matters. And then after the acquisition, she became the head of research of Forescout. And it's very nice. I love the presentation of Jaya. Okay, also because she introduced one of the many problems you talked about. It's a supply chain problem, the BOM, et cetera, which is basically the perfect introduction for you, Elisa.
Yes.
The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Yeah, indeed, it was like I couldn't have a better introduction. I have so many connection points with what has already been said. But I want to discuss a little bit what is our daily job, what do we do, and how basically at Forescout, in the research team that I lead, we deal with threat. And I'm going to go a little bit more of some technical details and sharing some of the experiences we had, but I think it actually gives a good dive into the perfect background that Jaya provided for us. So I want to start with a bit of introduction. I lead, as Sandro said, the Forescout research team. It's actually called Vedere Labs. It has been like a sort of rebranding lately. And the reason why we wanted to do that was to actually give a clear mission statement on what we do at Forescout. Actually, I'm Italian. Security Matters was largely done by Italians, and we have still a strong presence there. But the name was not, Vedere Labs is actually an Italian name, but the name was not chosen by any Italian. So the Americans somehow thought that having an Italian name was cool. And I really like it because what it means, vedere, is like to see. And that's what we are trying to do on a daily basis, like to see beyond what a device is, to see what threats they are bringing to us. Also, I'm very proud about the team. It's a quite international team. And the reason why I'm giving this background is also to give you some credibility that the things I'm saying actually make sense, and also to share some of my proud moments. Most of these people have gone through the TUI or Twente. They have like huge background in a very different skill set, different languages, which is very good nowadays to speak some Russian, for instance, and have like, are also coming from different nationalities. They moved to Eindhoven, where we actually have our labs. This is the lab that we have in Eindhoven. And if there are students out there, I have very proud, actually, I have graduated more than 50 master's students in the last 10 years. They come to us, they do their projects. Some of them, they get hired. Some of them, they go to other industries, but they really do experience, and they have helped us to build this kind of lab, which is basically a walkthrough lab of any organization. Some of the times, whenever we speak with people about the risk that IoT poses, what OT devices are, even CISO, they have problems understanding what it is. And if you work in the lab, you actually have this experience, because you see, and we host you in a modern teleconference room. There is Zoom, there are all these IoT devices, there is Alexa, and then you move forward, and there are the cabinets with all the building automation things. And if you go another step forward, there are actually the heavy OT machinery that are actually, moving manufacturing lines and helping with oil extraction, gas pipeline, etc. We also have some fun with train models and hospital models, etc. So what do we do on a daily basis at Vedere Labs? So we have built what we call a factory. It's basically a place, framework in the cloud where we actually collect data from a multitude of sources. And what we do with this data is correlating, enriching, try to understand how the threats are moving and evolving. One of the first data that we get is actually, like I think I am one of the evil in that sense, because we actually collect telemetry from our customer, trying to understand what's going on in their network. So one of the first things is anonymized data from our customers. And this data contain mostly device information. So we have an understanding of what devices are in those networks. Again, for credibility, we monitor more than 3,000 customers across the globe. They have from a variety of industry, from healthcare to government to manufacturing. And we see how the IoT world is actually moving, what devices are entering in, what are they doing, what are the common mistakes. Everything is on the same VLAN, and these kind of things. Then what we do in the intelligence factory is actually grasping additional data from a variety of sources. Some of those sources are also powered by Vedere Labs. Some of them are like third party with which we collaborate. But for instance, we actually have set up a honey system, a system of honeypots across the world. They're actually simulating OT, IoT, medical devices, try to understand how they are attacked, what they do. We actually get malware from there because they drop the malware. Sometimes many actors, threat actors, actually test their payload before they are released. If you are looking into malware, sometimes you see version 1, version 2, version 3, they need to test it. We hope that they test it in our honeypot, because then we will be a little bit of a step ahead in understanding what they are doing. We also get malware from our incident response team. So if there is an incident in our customers, we go there, we collect the forensic, the malware, we dissect it, we do reverse engineering. Everything goes into this Intel factory. We also have potential for a lot of new projects. So we are actually, at the moment with Darknet, we are not heavily exploiting it in the sense that it would be lovely to have NLP and scrapping of the Darknet to try to correlate also that. And let's say that you see a bad IP in the honeypot, and then you can ask the Darknet and go into the Telegram chat, into the Discord charts, and try to understand, okay, what are they doing? What are they really thinking? And I will tell you some of the stuff we have learned in the past year. Then what we do, we put all of this there, we shake. We actually do correlation, enrichment, we apply machine learning. We have a variety of techniques to solve several use cases. And what you get as output is threat intelligence. Threat intelligence can be strategic. Threat intelligence can be tactical. So you get reports, we get dashboard, we get to understand the trend, we get to do some prediction, and we get to also have some more tactical things like a threat feed where you can actually ingest it in your threat intelligence platform and try to understand if the IoT is being a threat to you. So if I go into more like of a structural way to separate the activities that we have done in the past years things related to vulnerability research. We have generated like threat dashboards. Actually, I have a list of references at the end of the presentation I can point you to. But there are some dashboards that are publicly available. You can go on our website, vederelabs.com, and you see the trends. How many IoT devices are? How are they separated? What kind of risks do they pose? What are the most exploitable vulnerabilities that we see, and where do we see them, etc. We also generate a variety of threat reports. They can be around a specific threat actor. They can be around a specific malware, certain campaign, like Pipestream is on the work at the moment. Then we have the threat feeds and some sharing connection. But before, like I would just today in the chat with you guys, I would like to just focus on the vulnerability research and on another project which is related to the HoneyNet, because it gives you some tangible understanding of the problems that we see. So last year, I don't know how many of you have heard about Project Memoria? Anybody? So our PR didn't do such a great job, as they said. We started the year, like 2 years ago, a project which we called Project Memoria, because we were looking at vulnerabilities that were mostly related to the way memory allocation is managed. And this project had one big aim, which was to do the largest study on TCP/IP stack vulnerability. And why it matters is because it's a supply chain kind of problem. TCP/IP stack are components that are in every OT, IoT, and any connected devices, actually. And what we wanted to do is understanding, OK, what's the situation there? What are these stacks? How are they used? They are lightweight because we actually studied stacks that are mostly used in IoT that have one commonality, being lightweight, for instance. And we partnered with various industry universities to actually do that. One of the partners was JSoft, that then was acquired by JFrog. And actually, they do firmware analysis. You give a firmware, they do an analysis. They apply static and dynamic analysis to understand if there are vulnerabilities. So it's in the kind of things we were discussing before. And our main goal was to educate the community about what can go wrong and why this is an issue. So in the 1 year of the project, we actually have done different disclosure, because we analyzed something like 15 different stacks, and then we did the disclosure in time. It took a lot of time, and I will share with you some of the issues when you are doing vulnerability disclosure that is about the supply chain, because basically identifying who should be the one you need to speak to fix it, it might be complex. And in total, those are the numbers of our project. So we had in 1 year around 97 vulnerabilities, and by analyzing 14 TCP/IP stack. If you go and you see how different these vulnerabilities are between each other, there are probably 5 or 6 types of vulnerabilities. Some of them are very, very in the same place, basically. Of these 14 stacks, 8 of them had a problem with the DNS way of dealing with the DNS implementation, which basically was the same across the different stacks. And they were private stack, open source stack. So there is basically the understanding that there is actually, we proposed a change to the way the DNS RFC was actually written, because if everybody interprets it's wrong, maybe it was not clear enough. So we had a lot of lessons learned. One of the things that for me was most struggling is actually the impact in terms of number of devices, number of vendors, and number of products that are affected. So whenever we have done vulnerability research before, what you do is you take one device, and you have one vendor of that device. You look for vulnerabilities. That is their vendor. It's a one-on-one conversation. If the vendor is really stubborn, then you go to CISA, or you go to the certification authority trying to understand it to get some mediation. But that's easy. What we had here was with 14 stack, because the stack is actually just a piece of a product, you had to go and understand which products were actually using that piece, and then go to their product security. And some of those were out of business, but maybe they were producing actually water pumps or heavy machinery for OT. So we had a list of more than 400 vendors. Actually, I think it was 500 and more, 400 of them more or less unknowledge. We are still keeping a list of advisories coming out. So for 97 vulnerabilities, there have been 81 advisories being affected and providing some recommendation. And sometimes that just the time to acknowledge that something was actually vulnerable was up to 170 days, so much longer than the 90 days. And I want to just spend some time to show to you why supply chain vulnerabilities are a problem, and why these numbers, although for us were quite impressive, they are just the tip of the iceberg. I'm sure there are many more products and many more vendors that are vulnerable to this kind of vulnerabilities, and they just don't know about it. And the reason why is because it's a scaling problem. Where we found the vulnerable TCP/IP stack basically was developed by someone, from some developers, maintained by vendors or by communities, and then they end up into network cards, motherboards, embedded OS. And now all of those end up in real products. And now these products can be a variety of products. They can be VoIP phones, IP camera, industrial controllers. Those are not just random examples. Those are actually examples of vulnerable products we have seen. These are some of them. And what is staggering for me is that a VoIP phone has vulnerabilities similar to a blood collection system or to NASA robots. They share the same piece of component that can be vulnerable. But identifying that, if you do not have a SBOM, and there is a long time before we all move to SBOM, is that you can actually have general purpose attack that basically are leveraging vulnerability that is in thousands of products. And that's why it's important to understand how they work, understanding the impact. And this is an example actually of the implications of these kind of vulnerabilities. So everyone, amnesia 33, nucleus 13, and wreck and numberjack, they are all the name that we give to a set of the vulnerabilities under Project Memoria. But what you see here, this is a network of a pharmacy that we see under our cloud. And if you see, this network actually is all on the same VLAN. So they are basically connected to each other. And then you have there a medication dispensing system, a printer, a VoIP phone, an access control, a printing automation controller, and a computer on the same network. And I'm not making this up. That means that I can basically have a variety of entry points if I want to target. Maybe the medication dispensing system is the one that I'm after. And if this is not a pharmacy, but this is an industrial control system, I can target the distribution line by basically entering via the IP phone. And we just have done a super interesting research. I cannot say all of it because it's actually still under embargo, but we are releasing it on the 1st of June. What we have done is a proof of concept for a ransomware that actually enters from an IoT device. It moves laterally to a Windows machine, and then it does the ransomware on the Windows machine, but as a nice collateral effect, also scans for IoT devices or OT devices that are vulnerable to known vulnerabilities, and just does DOS attack to those. This is known as like double, triple exfiltration, and it's basically a sort of evolution of how things are going. So this can become a commodity for attackers. And I spoke at the beginning about some dashboard that we are actually sharing with the public, where we can share the information that we gather during our analysis. So this one, again, I have the reference at the end, is something that you can find on vederalabs.com, and is updated daily with information about how the trend in the IoT devices is changing. So we give some basic stats around how many IoT versus IT devices do you have, how they are breakdown is mostly, like one of the most common IoT device is actually a Vocera controller. It's like a speaker that doctors put onto their dresses to actually be able to communicate with everybody. Those are IoT devices, are incredibly common and also full of vulnerabilities. And then we also compute risk for every device. So we have a way to compute risk that takes into account the device posture, so vulnerabilities, open ports, etc., and the device behavior. Am I communicating with bad known devices? Am I communicating with devices I should not speak to? Or do I see any indicator of a compromise? So I just invite you to go there. The reason we are doing that is basically to provide a global threat monitoring. And something that is not public yet, but will be like an update of that dashboard we are working on, is basically understanding what threat actors are active and where. Some of the question we get a lot of times when speaking with customers is, are the Chinese in my network? Are the Russians in my network? What are my targeted? So it helps to do security investment, understanding why someone would be interested in targeting them, right? Right now, ransomware, everybody is a possible target of ransomware, but we are trying to give a breakdown. So this is quite interesting. So this is a small pilot in the sense that we are monitoring here 144 sites, and they are sending to us DNS information, so the queries that they do to the DNS server. And what we do, we match it with bad DNS that we see in our honeynet, or bad DNS that are well known and an indicator of compromise. And so we see that in general, there are hundreds of match every day, but what is very interesting is the fact that we are doing enrichment. So we are trying, by querying the other sources I was mentioning, the darknet, our oninet, and available information, we managed to see what is the threat actor behind that communication. And so you see here stuff like UNC 2452, which is like the threat actors behind SolarWinds, still pretty much active. So sometimes the understanding, at least I am maybe naive, my understanding is that if a threat is well known and if indicators of compromise are well known, you should not see them in a network that you monitor, because everybody has the maturity level good enough to actually protect themselves from things that they know. But that's not the case. So we can actually track, again, what are the threat actors that are most active, why, and what kind of threat types we see the most. And my aspiration is actually being able to cross-reference this information with maybe Telegram chats or Discord charts. I don't know if you have been listening, like there has been a huge leak of the Conti threat actor group. They were basically speaking, like all their chat for a year and a half has been leaked. And I don't know if you have been going through that, but I'm lucky enough that one of my colleagues actually speaks Russian, and we did a good report, which is published on our website. You can also get it. One of the main takeaway was they were actually discussing things like, oh, hospitals have these IoT devices, everything is connected to the internet, we should just become better at doing exploit at those. So it's like it really goes into that direction. You can really see that, and maybe we can do some sort of trying to predict where they are going and try to be better prepared. Yeah, so this is just like a summary of that. The last thing I want to briefly mention and discuss with you is the honey system that we are putting in place, where we are trying to basically improve the way that we can do threat attribution, do artifact analysis. I think I was speaking before with some of my colleagues, like before a threat actors release something like Pipe Dream, they actually have to test it. And most of the time they test it on targets that are, weak targets, similar targets to what they are looking at, but not the real one. So if we manage to be, or to let the attackers believe we are that target, we can actually get payload well in advance, and we can actually analyze that. So that's one of the goals that we have, understanding, how the botnet are evolving, understanding how the trends of the attack are. And this is like how it works like at the moment. So we have a honeynet. This honeynet, we are now simulating several targets. We are simulating a medical device. We are simulating a log4j server. We are simulating a camera and a PLC. And then we have IonSpect and Suricata, which are two intrusion detection systems. IonSpect is very based on IoT, OT, and IOMT. Suricata is more general purpose. We put it together, and we are throwing all the data to the intelligence factory to actually monitor that. And these are some of the results that we have. So this is a dashboard that we are using to monitor the trends I was mentioning before. And this is an internship project, by the way. So it was like a student coming and creating this honeypot for us. And now we are at the second stage of this project, in which we have launched it. Now it's publicly available. And we see, OK, what are the attacks? What are the alerts that we see? We see stuff like log4j being there. We see the use of this RFP protocol version. So I was interested. It's like, OK, this is a weak protocol. And we know that using it might be, but what are they really looking into this protocol? Maybe before doing the pipe dream attack, they were doing something similar on the ISE 104 protocol to try to understand how it works, to try to get pickups, etc. So this is all hint for additional analysis. Something else I want to point out is that, there are several vulnerabilities that are being exploited, several TTPs, and commonly used the port, command and control, so DNS queries, IP queries, etc., and where the attackers are coming from. They use a huge, big ball on Eindhoven. That's just because we were testing and we didn't clean the data from that. All right, and here are some references. I promised you to leave with you that. But if you go to really the vederalabs.com, you find all of that, the dashboard. You find all the reports we have released. We are actually also starting to do some threat briefing, both for customer and interested parties. So you might also be able to subscribe to that. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We are a little bit over time, but I think there's time for one or two questions, or you can address in the, yes, over there.
Sorry, I didn't get that.
We didn't get the question.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry. I didn't really get it. How did you detect which device is using which kind of implementation of TCP/IP?
Oh, yeah.
Stacks?
Yeah, so we have it's network-based. So on the network, the devices, sometimes this TCP/IP stack have a fingerprint. So it can be a banner. Sometimes it can be a way, in the TLS, or how they do the handshake, that is very specific to that one. So we did the fingerprinting for that, and we released those fingerprint. There is a GitHub page with all this information. It's called the Memoria Detector, and there are all the details on the fingerprints we have been able to find for all the stacks we analyzed.
Then Elisa is going to be here also in the break.
Okay, do I need that for the next questions?
Small Italian present for you, also for Jaya, but then it's I'm going to reach her.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much.
Thanks.
A big hand for Elisa Costante.